happening there, but I gotta give it to you. Let's get into the Swiss round number 12, our final round of Swiss here at the 2025 Pokemon North America International Championships. And pick your poison here. It's horse bike versus horse bike.
It is a stare down. We had them all looking at each other in that team preview, and they are doing so again right on the battlefield. Again, the Choice Scarf Miraidon is going to be attacking first out of everything on the field, which does give Michael a little bit of an advantage here. It gives him the chance to go for something like a Volt Switch, maybe pivot around. You could even Snarl, maybe lower the special attack of that Calyrex Shadow Rider. Actually will come in handy too if the Calyrex does use Substitute. Snarl being a sound move will bypass that Substitute, still deal damage to Calyrex and lower its special attack. It is the Terra normal, so you can maybe Terra away from that, but tearing away to dodge Snarl damage, maybe not the best use of that resource.
Yeah, but it depends on what you feel like you're going to need that for in the end. So we are going to see Terastallization before we get into our first turn of attacks and onto that Koraidon, usually going to be the Pokemon that we see get that Terastallization, just because it is really good at being able to boost up those other attacks, and now you also don't have to deal with taking that super effective Ice-type damage. And it's going to be matched another Terastallization here, this time onto the Ice Rider Calyrex for the fire. So you've got defensive Terras on both ends.
Just making sure that those Pokemon aren't taking too much damage, Terastallizing away from a couple weaknesses. Volt Switch comes through though, and because of that dropping the Dragon type from Terra, the Volt Switch does a big chunk of damage.
Yeah, that's already half of that Koraidon's HP gone, and that means that it's going to be so much easier for this Calyrex to potentially finish it off. It's got high horsepower, so by taking this Terra Fire, you are also making yourself vulnerable to that particular move. It is not going to get a same type attack bonus because Calyrex Ice is notably not a ground type, but it's still going to do a lot of damage here. Shadow Rider is going to use the Astral Barrage first. Incineroar makes a great switch in there to be able to resist that damage. The Flare Blitz is now going to follow up into this Ice Rider Calyrex, and that's actually going to take it quite low. Another Astral Barrage looks like it will be able to finish it off as Calyrex just tries to go for the Glacial Lance here. Not going for the high horsepower, and because it doesn't, Koraidon actually gets to hold on for the next turn.
Luckily for Gabriel too, the Trick Room was not set up. You know, if that was a Trick Room, this is a really powerful position to be in, having the two slowest Pokemon on the field. But because, you know, we still have the corrected speed orders, this Calyrex Ice Rider for Michael did take a lot of damage on that turn. The Terastallization was completely necessary for making sure it didn't get knocked out, but it is very, very low. One more attack from either of these Pokemon will be able to knock it out. We have the Shadow Rider Calyrex from Gabriel at the same time, able to knock it out with Astral Barrage, get some more damage onto Incineroar. And because it is that Assault Vest, you don't have anything like the Helping Hand or Protect even to make sure it gets an attack off first.
Yeah, so you're really just looking at raw damage. At least both of these Pokemon are fairly low on Gabriel's side that you will be able to get the KO. Even if it's just going to be a fake out and Koraidon goes down to it, you're at least able to get a KO at the end of the day, no matter how you get the job done. Gabriel still has a Shadow Rider Calyrex though, and this poor Miraidon is going to have to switch in to take this Astral Barrage. It is still going to be there for the next turn, but the critical hit onto the Incineroar does make this a 7-hit knockout now instead of maybe like an 8.
That Astral Barrage is really important damage on Miraidon as well. If Gabriel does have the Flutter Mane in the back, once it comes in, it should be able to knock out Miraidon with one Moonblast, whereas, you know, potentially, depending on how Miraidon's trained, it might be able to stomach one from full.
But even in this situation, Gabriel now has the Incineroar in for free, can just go for the fake out into the Miraidon, and based on that Astral damage, should just be a knockout from here. You don't even need to think about that fourth Pokemon in the back.
You don't, but if you do opt to go straight for that Astral Barrage, you're probably giving up your Calyrex Shadow Rider at the same time to an attack from Michael's own Incineroar. And at that point, you'd be losing both the restricted Pokemon.
Yeah, but look at that. Gabriel is really excited about the fact that we do see the fake out work into this Miraidon, and so this should be a KO onto it, and then you're still going to have to whittle through this Incineroar. But after that KO, this Calyrex Shadow does get a nice boost to its special attack, but can it keep it? Because it really does depend on what this Incineroar is going for, and it does seem like this should have been a likely turn of events here, but maybe Gabriel is just very confident about what he has in the back to be able to deal with this now that both of his restricted Pokemon are KO'd.
I think he's got to be pretty confident given his reaction there, right? He was very happy that the Miraidon was able to be knocked out this turn, which means that there is no more Choice Scarf Miraidon able to threaten a lot of damage into that team. It will be the Ogerpon Wellspring form. I do kind of like this position for Gabriel now. The sun being up means that Flare Blitz from his own Incineroar might even be able to take a one-hit KO onto Michael's Amoonguss. And despite the sun being up, that Ivy Cudgel is still going to be very strong. Might come pretty close to a knockout on Incineroar here. Even if it doesn't knock out, though, thankfully being the water typing means it's less vulnerable to the Flare Blitz. I think you're in a spot now where because that Calyrex Ice Rider from Michael's end is so low, you might actually be in a strong position here despite the 2 to 3 Pokemon deficit.
Yeah, I really do agree with you. I think Gabriel is in a great position versus this Amoonguss, and especially because this electric terrain is still active, it's not like Gabriel's Incineroar can get put to sleep, and you still have that natural grass typing on the Ogerpon that's going to keep you safe from those spores as well. And the Ivy Cudgel, let's see if it's able to get the job done in the sun, and it is super effective. Don't forget that Ivy Cudgel also has an increased chance to get those critical hits, so it felt like a really good job well done here for this Ogerpon. And now 2v2. Michael just has this low health Calyrex Ice left against this Incineroar and Ogerpon combo.
This is a really powerful position to be in if you're Gabriel now. This Calyrex Ice Rider will be knocked out by a single Ivy Cudgel. Electric terrain being up still means that Incineroar cannot be put to sleep. You possibly, if the electric terrain wasn't here, have the option to protect the Calyrex, maybe try and put Incineroar to sleep and go from there. But because electric terrain remains, nothing can be put to sleep if it touches the ground. Your Ogerpon cannot be redirected by Rage Powder, given that it is a grass type. So now you have a pretty clear road to victory here. You just go for that Ivy Cudgel into Calyrex and Flare Blitz into Amoonguss.
But this makes sense, though. I think Michael using this Protect on both the Calyrex and the Amoonguss, it's buying him some time. Maybe the sun is able to disappear and the Amoonguss actually doesn't get knocked out if he knows the damage calculation there. And you're also getting rid of this electric terrain pretty soon, too. But this Amoonguss, it's not going to be able to get through it. And so, yeah, with the sun active, one-hit knockout here. And it's just this Calyrex. So, you know, the second part of what I was going to say is that now Michael has time to think about what to do for game 2.
Right. Seeing how much recoil damage between their Flare Blitz and the Rocky Helmet is wild, too. Even though the Calyrex did protect itself last turn, it doesn't really have much respite anymore against these 2 remaining Pokemon for Gabriel, who has put himself in a position to be 1 game up, 1 game away from top cut, and another kind of showing that you maybe don't need your restricted Pokemon to close out games here, much like we saw with Marco last round. We saw Gabriel use them very well at the beginning of the game, got out some really important damage. Even with that Calyrex Ice Rider turning into a fire type via Terastallization, you got that really important Astral Barrage plus Flare Blitz combo, which put it in range later on in the game. You can kind of ignore it as long as that Trick Room doesn't go up, because you know you can finish it off later on. And I really loved, especially after that turn where Miraidon got faked out and Astral Barrage for the knockout. I think at that point Gabriel knew, okay, I have this game locked up. I know that this Wellspring Ogerpon in the back will be enough to close out the game because of all this work I put in the early game.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm just like kind of thinking about where Michael goes from here. I felt like already right off the bat, I think the leads felt a little bit better for Gabriel. Just knowing that Michael had to pivot out this Miraidon, I don't think it felt very good. Even going for the Volt Switch, it just didn't make the KO easy enough to be able to grab onto the Miraidon before it was dealing some pretty significant damage to you. And so I wonder if you decide to go ahead and stick to your game plan. Maybe 1 turn would have been the difference for you for making it work versus not. And okay, well, now the bikes are gone, so we've got now Incineroar rider.
Instead of horse and bike, it's horse and cat.
Yeah. The whole zoo is unleashed.
Exactly. The Intimidate order here will be Michael's Intimidate activating first. So possibly an advantage in the kind of fake out speed war here between the 2 Incineroar. The Incineroar speed interaction is always interesting because you want your fake out to be first, but you want your pivot move to be second. So like a half advantage for Michael here because he gets to fake out, but if they both go for either U-turn or parting shot, you kind of want your opponent's pivot to go first so you can see what they bring in and then make your decision from there.
It also just helps you too because you don't want to be taking too much damage on whatever switches in. So we will just see no switches actually this turn. All 4 Pokemon are going to stay in. Ice Rider Calyrex is now going to become Fire type Calyrex. And we're going to see the fake out from Michael's Incineroar, at least be able to delay this Incineroar on Gabriel's side for one more turn. Nice to have this fire typing because you're also going to remove your super effectiveness, but the critical hit from the Calyrex definitely doesn't feel good. Ice Rider Calyrex in response is going to deal the Glacial Lance, and you know, kind of a pretty neutral turn, all things considered. The damage trades are pretty even.
Neutral turn, but that critical hit on the Astral Barrage could be a big deal here. We saw in the first game one Astral Barrage do just under half of the Calyrex Ice Rider's HP, and now that it's down into the yellow, it might be very, very close, even possibly a damage roll to get that knockout with Astral Barrage. Now you have a much less safe turn if you're Michael here. Do you want to protect your Calyrex, make sure it doesn't get knocked out by Astral Barrage, and even a double up from that Incineroar, or do you want to go on the offensive, maybe bank on surviving it instead?
Well, it's just going to be a protect that you know 100% certainty you're going to survive this turn. And a good protect it is. This Incineroar has been able to take these Astral Barrages like a champ, and so Gabriel is going to get denied a knockout on this turn. And the U-turn into the Calyrex. So a pivot here, Michael is going to have to reveal the third Pokemon brought to this game, and I don't think it's too much of a surprise that it's going to be that second restricted Pokemon in the Miraidon. And now you get to kind of really let loose here with that Choice Scarf. You're going to be faster than this Shadow Rider. But a U-turn from the Gabriel as well. Those are the pivot moves we were talking about before. And after seeing the Miraidon, you get a chance to say, okay, well, we got two choices in the back here. What is really going to be that best option to bring out onto the field now? Exactly.
The perfect advantage of the slower U-turn there means that you get to decide, you know, what do I have best that can kind of protect this Astral Barrage Calyrex Shadow Rider from possibly getting knocked out by this Miraidon. I think that's definitely the right choice to bring in for Michael there, just because you now, despite not getting the KO on the Calyrex with U-turn, threaten it with another KO from this Miraidon. I think any of its attacks at this point, Volt Switch, Snarl, Electro Drift, obviously Draco Meteor from this range. But now, if you're Gabriel, you still have all four of your Pokemon, which kind of makes navigating the rest of this game a lot better, especially given that this Astral Barrage is still threatening huge damage into pretty much everything left on Michael's team. We saw the Urshifu be the fourth Pokemon from Michael instead of the Amoonguss in this game, which really doesn't want to be taking those very strong special attacks, and also somewhat disincentivizes a possible Trick Room option, but we are still seeing Michael eye it up here.
Well, I think this is also, I think, a really good, well, actually, I was going to say it looks good, but sometimes I feel like these Trick Rooms have really come back to bite some of our players. Because that Urshifu is going to be a bit more naturally speedy, it really depends on what Gabriel has brought. Everything on his team is still also fairly quite fast, but sometimes these Ogerpons, they really do drop a lot of their speed for bulk. So you really just never know at the end of the day how both of those Pokemon will match up.
It's going to be tough here. Calyrex Shadow Rider will leave the field, though, does not want to be knocked out just yet, and is going to be replaced by the Incineroar.
Okay, so the Assault Vest now a really great item to have to increase your special defense versus this incoming Volt Switch. And unfortunately, Incineroar, though, getting stopped by that clear amulet onto this Ice Rider. Michael, though, knows you're still getting good damage off into this Incineroar, and because this Koraidon protected, you are getting a free Trick Room setup here.
Trick Room will certainly go up. It just depends on what you want next to this Ice Rider to take advantage of that Trick Room. If you bring in your Incineroar, it means your Incineroar now has the slower pivot because of Trick Room, but unfortunately has the slower Fake Out as well. So Gabriel would have Fake Out advantage going into this Trick Room. It is set up. We still have Fake Out available for Gabriel here. Now this Koraidon will be attacking last. And I do believe Terrestrialization is still on the table. Thanks to the Sun, if you turn into a fire type, you know, the Surging Strikes become super effective, which maybe isn't too great, but Sun does mitigate that damage a little bit still, so surely will still be nowhere near a one-hit KO. You just have to worry about, you know, the possible double up with something like High Horsepower. Even a Glacial Lance plus Surging Strikes will still be doing a lot of damage. And the Trick Room going up better for your Incineroar if you're Gabriel, but this now Calyrex Ice Rider kind of has control over this game. You cannot swap in your Calyrex Shadow Rider here. If the Ogerpon is the fourth Pokemon for Gabriel again, a couple of Glacial Lances and Trick Room are really scary.
Yeah, but I think because of the Fake Out potential, this is why we see, despite the fact that this Trick Room is set up, Calyrex Ice is going to go for the Protect. And Urshifu just goes for the close combat. So not terrestrializing here actually ends up being a pretty good thing. But what did this Koraidon decide to do? You can take advantage of this defense drop, but the collision course goes into this Ice Rider Calyrex. So what a great protected turn for Michael.
In a great spot to be in now. You pretty freely threaten a double KO here. High horsepower into Incineroar and close combat into Koraidon should be 2 knockouts, which is exactly what you want to see going into Trick Room. This is only the second turn, so there's going to be a couple more turns after this one to make advantage of it, which means that if you do get 2 knockouts here, this Calyrex Shadow Rider is now forced onto the field with a couple turns of Trick Room remaining, and you'd require a double protect to survive those. Now, a much more commanding offensive position for Michael than we saw him in Game 1, because now he has control. This Ice Rider, despite taking a lot of damage, that critical hit Astral Barrage even, now doesn't really face the threat of something like those fast attacks from Gabriel at the end of Game 1.
You have to kind of find a way if you're Gabriel to stall out the Trick Room, and it does get a little bit harder when you are starting to run out of turns for protects. You also can't protect in front of this Urshifu because of its Unseen Fist ability, and that does make things way harder. That's why you see Gabriel actually pivot out this Koraidon. I think recognizes that this will be a very key piece later. And you've got the U-turn as well. So if you want to, I think you can bring something in. Maybe you sacrifice, but I take a look at some of these options and maybe you see like Ogerpon would be quite nice here. You still have Water Absorb because you have not actually, terrestrialized here, but Calyrex Shadow Rider has to get knocked out, and then depending on what this Urshifu pick, this poor Ogerpon is going to get knocked out too.
This was a really, really good turn for Gabriel. If Michael had decided to go for a high horsepower into the Incineroar and close combat into Shadow Rider, but I think Michael made a really good choice here. Instead of leaving open the possibility of kind of having your moves read, he went straight for moves that are guaranteed to get damage out. I think the Calyrex, if it was to swap in, was certainly going to be in that Koraidon slot for close combat into Incineroar is very safe. Like you said, you really don't want to be using Surging Strikes with the opportunity for the Ogerpon to swap in, mitigate that damage entirely. So the Glacial Lance there is a really solid option. You're going to knock out the Calyrex, may even knock out the Incineroar, especially now with the boost from Grimnay, but it was looking a little bit close already, and now you've put yourself at a 4-2 Pokemon advantage. It's going to be pretty hard to come back from up your Gabriel.
Yeah, still a couple of turns of that Trick Room as well, so even if the Incineroar can go for a Fake Out onto one of these Pokemon, and you can probably secure a knockout onto either with the damage, you know that this Calyrex Ice is going to knock you out first. And Michael Kelsch with this game win ties up our series. We go down to the third and final game in this set to decide who between Michael and Gabriel moves on to our top cut.
Really impressive rebound from Michael there after a Game 1 that Gabriel had pretty much full control of. Michael said, it's my turn to kind of dominate this game during our match. Kind of indicative of his run through this tournament as well. I believe he started yesterday 6-0, lost his last 2 rounds, and now has won every round in day 2 so far. So really impressive mental resolve just to show that, hey, my back's against the wall now. If he had lost any round of Swiss today, he would have been eliminated from top cut, but now finds himself in position to be 1 game away. Of course, Gabriel in the same spot, though. Now Gabriel, having so much experience at this international level, knows exactly how to turn around from maybe letting a little bit of a lead early on slip in that game. And it's going to be one game to decide which trainer makes it into top cut.
Oh boy, and I cannot wait to see how this one is going to end. We are ready to get into this third and final game of the set. So let's see what both of our trainers decide to put their money on. It's going to be this Incineroar and Shadow Rider for Gabriel, and it looks like a run back of the leads for Game 2 as we see this Calyrex Ice from Michael hit the field right away.
After that first turn, after that critical hit Astral Barrage, it looked a little bit in Gabriel's favor, but as soon as that Trick Room went up, it seemed like Michael knew exactly how to close out that game. Gabriel needs to find another game plan despite having the same exact lead that might even play out the same exact way. I wouldn't be surprised to see that Fake Out Astral Barrage, Glacial Lance to get some damage going, and then readjust your game plans from there. We do see the Amoonguss and the Urshifu, so there is no Miraidon this time around from Michael. Maybe indicates that he wants to lean even further into that Trick Room mode. You don't have to worry about your Choice Scarf Miraidon getting in the way. Miraidon being gone too means that there's never going to be electric terrain on the field, and nothing to stop those spores.
Yeah, it is kind of counterintuitive when you've got the Amoonguss on your Miraidon team, but Nice. So when you have these options to really use your pieces in different ways. Another terastallization here just to keep it safe. You don't want to take any super effective damage from either this Incineroar or this Shadow Rider. And with the knockoff, you actually do get rid of this Assault Vest. So these Astral Barrages, they're still not going to be doing too much damage because you do have that resist, but it is kind of nice. Oh, fake out. I'm sorry. I thought that I thought the Assault Vest was gone. I was like, wow, that actually moved quite fast.
Yeah, I think that Michael opted not to go for the fake out there, which meant that the Incineroar didn't get an attack off and did take a little bit of damage from that Astral Barrage. But Trick Room going up immediately, no opting for that initial Glacial Lance, means that the speed advantage will be Michael's for the next few turns. Again, I believe that Michael's Incineroar, I guess, now has a slower pivot, which really is exactly what you want in this position. You get to see what Gabriel's Incineroar opts to do before you attack with your own Incineroar. And depending on if it's a U-turn and knockoff, you get to kind of readjust if you want to pivot that out instead.
But we aren't going to see any switches. I feel like this Incineroar is still pretty safe, not going to get knocked out on this turn from this Calyrex or this Incineroar. And look at this. The Shadow Rider Calyrex shows off its normal Terra type. So with the knockoff into the Calyrex Ice, it's a critical hit. And that's going to knock off the Clear Amulet, but also bring down this Ice Rider Calyrex to quite a low HP. This Ice Rider Calyrex is going to try to fight back as hard as it can, but with the knockoff into the Calyrex, this Terra was perfect to make sure that this Shadow Rider could stay alive to get this Astral Barrage off, and big damage into both of these targets. Calyrex Ice goes down, and this Trick Room, it's not going to be something that Michael's able to use for this Ice Rider anymore.
And we saw there's no Miraidon. There are no more restricted Pokemon left for Michael. Presumably that Koraidon still looms in the back for Gabriel, but we have seen us be wrong about restricted Pokemon being brought in the back by these trainers today. Really, really important critical hit there. Despite the knockoff removing the Spooky Plate, removing that 20% boost to Ghost-type attacks, the Astral Barrage is able to KO that Calyrex Ice Rider because of that critical hit boosted damage. Really strong position for Gabriel to be in now, despite Trick Room being up, despite some of your Pokemon not having the speed advantage for the next few turns. If you are able to get out of Trick Room without losing too many important resources, you're going to be in a much better spot. And the fourth Pokemon for Michael, we have seen him in that menu, is that Amoonguss. So if Trick Room ends, Amoonguss is now very vulnerable to some very powerful attacks.
The good thing for Michael here is that he does have two of the slower Pokemon. I mean, the Urshifu is going to be, I think, just a little bit faster than this Incineroar, but we do see Gabriel make a pivot. This Shadow Rider Calyrex, despite getting that boost, knows it will be the fastest thing once this Trick Room expires. So Koraidon's going to come in, and it's going to set the sun. Might help make this Rapid Strike Urshifu a little bit better to deal with. U-turn from Gabriel means that there can be another pivot on the board here for him outside of that manual switch that he just did. And we'll have to see what comes in to take that Incineroar's place. It is going to be that Calyrex, so it's already a low HP. It's a better target to have to sacrifice here than letting your Incineroar go down. Once you get rid of this Shadow Rider Calyrex, you get a chance to actually get this Incineroar back in, get a fake out on the next turn, and then it puts this Koraidon from Gabriel in a commanding position.
Especially if the Calyrex Shadow Rider is knocked out by the Incineroar on this turn, you give yourself the option to swap into that Ogerpon Wellspring, if that's your fourth Pokemon, to now redirect any spores away from this Koraidon, which will have a hard time being damaged by this Urshifu. We saw that close combat do a decent chunk, but because the sun is up, those Surging Strikes will be next to useless. Especially nice that U-turn from Gabriel going into the Urshifu means that the Focus Sash is now broken. The Urshifu no longer has any protection of, kind of that one-hit KO factor, and so whatever comes in for Gabriel is going to be really important. Getting rid of that Astral Barrage, Calyrex Shadow Rider, also I think makes a lot of sense. We talked about maybe stalling out Trick Room and then using it later on, but knowing that Urshifu now is on the field, you're going to have a hard time stalling out Trick Room with Protects because it can just break right through them with that Unseen Fist.
Well, it is just going to be the Intimidate, and while we do usually see critical hits from the Surging Strikes, this Intimidate is still helpful for all of these close combats that the Urshifu can dish out. You now still have that fake out pressure. We talked about that with allowing this Shadow Rider Calyrex to go down, and maybe you just kind of deal with the Amoonguss. Or I don't know if you really care too much about one of these Pokemon going to sleep if you're able to actually get this KO onto the Urshifu or the Amoonguss, and because the Urshifu is going to detect, you kind to just have to go for the fake out into the Amoonguss, and well, let's see what this Koraidon does. Fortunately, it was a collision course into this Urshifu. Kind of an unfortunate missed opportunity here for Gabriel to have gone for something like the Flare Blitz instead, knowing this Amoonguss cannot terrestrialize anymore since that was expended onto the Calyrex.
It is tough now here. Amoonguss will have the opportunity to put one of these two Pokemon to sleep. If the Wellspring Ogerpon is Gabriel's fourth Pokemon, he maybe tries to catch a Spore into one of those slots, but both Pokemon also threaten very heavy damage into Amoonguss with a Flare Blitz. The Incineroar coming in from Michael hopes to mitigate some of that damage though.
Only a couple more turns of Trick Room are left, though, and this Incineroar is not going to help out with the damage output of this Koraidon. With the Spore from this Amoonguss, the first thing on this turn, we will see this Incineroar from Gabriel get put to sleep. There's only one Fire-type attacker that is off the board. It takes its mandatory turn, but now it is time for this Koraidon to do something, and the Incineroar is going to have to be on the receiving end of that collision course. It gets knocked out, and so Michael, down to his final two Pokemon, the Urshifu and the Amoonguss, has got to be enough versus Gabriel's Pokemon and that mystery fourth in the back.
The collision course there makes a ton of sense, knowing the Incineroar is the only Pokemon that can swap into that Urshifu slot, especially because the Urshifu had used close combat, had lowered its defense by one stage. The collision course would have been doing a ton of damage, if not knocking it out outright. The Incineroar coming in is the one getting knocked out on this turn instead, but now Gabriel, having 3 Pokemon left, if he really wants to, can swap out that Koraidon, get your attack back to neutral for the remainder of this game, and of course Trick Room expiring makes this Koraidon even more of a threat. Should be the fastest Pokemon on the field, and if the sun runs out pretty soon, swapping out that Koraidon will double in use in being able to reset up that sun with Orichalcum Pulse, maintain that attack boost from your ability for the next few turns, while also clearing out that Intimidate.
I think that's why you actually saw Michael go for a double attack into that Pokemon. If it is the Ogerpon, it might be able to get knocked out here, but the Amoonguss actually does go for the Protect. Knows that there is still this Flare Blitz as threat for this Amoonguss to stick around, and it gives this Urshifu some time to start whittling away at this Koraidon, but it's going to need 2 close combats to finish the job, and it's still going to drop its defenses in the process. There's one turn wake up here for the Incineroar, but it does go for a U-turn into the Amoonguss, but that was not as much time as maybe Michael would have hoped he bought with that Spore just a turn ago.
It's a huge wake up from that Incineroar. Of course, now you know that you have the option to go for those 2 attacks on this turn. Michael has to respect the Incineroar's Flare Blitz and possibly even target it with his Urshifu, which means that it won't be free to target this Koraidon. Now again, there's these 2 very powerful Flare Blitzes being threatened in the sun into this Amoonguss, and if you lose the Amoonguss, you've gone down to just 1 Pokemon remaining. We still have yet to see Gabriel's 4th as well. It could be that Ogerpon again, it could be Fluttermane. I think at this point, unlikely to be Screamtail, but Fluttermane even would be a solid option here, just to threaten some big damage into both Pokemon.
Amoonguss goes for the Rage Powder to try to protect this Urshifu to get one last attack off. So Koraidon is going to be able to get the knockout into that Pokemon with that super effective Flare Blitz. Does get a little bit of recoil from the Rocky Helmet as well as the Flare Blitz, but it is a job well done for this Koraidon. And I think it's actually still able to, give us a little bit of a show. At the end there, Gabriel is going to be down to just the Incineroar and whatever this 4th Pokemon is. But this Urshifu, it gets the 2nd KO. 1v1 here. It comes down to this, Jake. It's going to be this Urshifu against whatever Gabriel has thought of for the back for this final game of this set.
I think whatever it is, actually, Gabriel's in a really strong spot. Fluttermane will be able to knock out Urshifu from here. The Horn Leech from Ogerpon will be able to do it too. Even Screamtail could have closed the game out with Dazzling Gleam. But as long as close combat does not one-shot this Ogerpon, Gabriel will win.
Let's find out. Oh, close combat. It's just not going to get there. And the Urshifu drops its defenses one more time. I think Michael knows that this chance to make it to the top cut is slipping out of his hands. And with that final Horn Leech, Gabriel Agati, he wins, moves on to our top cut of the North America International Championships.
Really impressive stuff from Gabriel there. Despite that Trick Room going up early, he knew exactly what he needed to change from that second game to be able to come out on top. But Koraidon threatened way too much damage at all times, and despite not having, that Miraidon, which is kind of the biggest threat outside of Trick Room, Michael was able to hold it off a little bit, just not enough time. When Trick Room ended, the Koraidon was a huge threat into both that Urshifu